I will talk about becoming, das Werden. I comment the paragraph 88 of the Enzyklopädie der philosophischen Wissenschaften. This is what is called the shorter logic. I have produced 3 videos about a systematic commentary of die Lehre vom Sein, erste Abteilung der Logik. These are the previous videos on this channel. I will not repeat what I've said about pure being, pure nothing. Now I talk about becoming, but there are some words which can only be properly expressed in German. So, like in my previous videos, I will put in the description below links to channels which might help you learn German eventually or improve your German. So I read in German and then I translate. Okay. Das Nichts ist als dieses unmittelbare, sich selbst gleiche, ebenso umgekehrt dasselbe, was das Sein ist. So, nothing as this immediate, equal to itself, is the same as what being is. Die Wahrheit des Seins sowie des Nichts ist daher die Einheit beider. Diese Einheit ist das Werden. So the truth of being, pure being, as well as nothing, pure being, is consequently or therefore the unity of both, and this unity of being and nothing is Werden, das Werden, which means becoming, what we call becoming. What is, to say that becoming is a problem, I will talk about this later, but what is becoming? The unity of being and nothing. Okay. So I will comment what I have written. So if we say nothing, so nothing, the translation basically is nothing is immediate, equal to itself, the same as being. But if we say nothing is immediate, there's a contradiction, because we say that nothing is. We introduce being within nothing. And if we say nothing is nothing, that's a contradiction, because nothing is nothing. That's contradictory to say that nothing is nothing. So nothing is not nothing. Then what is it? If it's not nothing, if it's not itself, nothing is not nothing. So nothing is nothing. That's contradictory. So nothing is not nothing. So it's the negation of itself. And to negate nothing means to go into being. It might seem that I am insane, but someday maybe people will understand that pure speculative philosophy, when grasped properly, is sometimes quite comical. Anyway. And here, in the paragraph that I have just read, these 4 lines, die Wahrheit des Seins sowie des Nichts ist daher die Einheit beider. Diese Einheit ist das Werden. So here, at the beginning, so to speak, of the science of logic, we already have a definition of truth, because at this point, there is no logic, there is no truth, there is no rationality, there's just pure being, pure nothing, and one go into the other go into the other itself, and we have becoming. So it's the very beginning, so to speak. And here we already have a glimpse of the notion of truth, namely that truth is a development, a growth, a process. Truth is concrete, and concrete, I said in a previous video, it comes from Latin, means cum crescere means to grow with, to develop with. And the truth is a unity of different determinations. That's what we call concrete. A concrete object is an object which has multiple determinations. And the truth of being is not being. The truth of being is not nothing. The truth of nothing is not nothing. The truth of nothing is not being. The truth of both, which are one, is precisely the unity of both, that which we call becoming. Becoming is the truth of being and of nothing. And here, I will talk about Julius Evola. In some of his books, he says that tradition is the world of being as opposed to anti-tradition, which is the world of becoming. But being and becoming, it seems to be, very speculative. It is, but that's an old debate among philosophers, the difference between being and becoming. But I have just made 3 videos of about 3 hours. I have just commented a few passages by Hegel. The difference between being and becoming is just what has been said. These are the poorest determinations one can think of. Being, nothing, becoming. It's extremely poor. Very abstract, very poor. So, yeah. Of course, when people say being versus becoming, they do not think about what being and becoming are in their truth, these pure abstract determinations. They think that being is some sort of stable, eternal, fixed, true, whereas becoming is delusional, ephemeral, etc., etc. But here we are in the realm of representation. But pure being and pure becoming are just the concepts, so to speak, that Hegel and Hegel talks about and that I have tried to explain. And here also we have the beginning of the notion of truth that I have just mentioned, and also the dialectics in its pure abstraction, namely abstract, negation, concrete. Being is abstract, there is no determination, and because it is abstract, it turns into the opposite of itself, which is nothing. So nothing is the negation of the abstraction, which is being. So being, abstract, nothing, negation, and Werden, becoming, is the unity of both, which is concrete. That's the dialectical movement in its purest abstraction. So dialectics, in this view, is at the root of everything. Because later, I will show that out of becoming becomes a thing. And I could say dialectics is at the root of everything, but at the root of everything as well. The person who invented the English language was pretty smart, I guess. So when people in ordinary consciousness, every time there's a strange occurrence, they say, oh, that must be Hegelian dialectics. But what is Hegelian dialectics? I have just explained in its most conceptual, abstract form what dialectics is. But to say what dialectics is not proper, because dialectics is not. And to say that it is and it is not at the same time, this is dialectics. Okay. Then, there are 5 sub-commentaries. I begin with the first. Der Satz Sein und Nichts ist dasselbe erscheint für die Vorstellung oder den Verstand als ein so paradoxer Satz, dass sie ihn vielleicht nicht für ernstlich gemeint hält. So, to say that being is nothing seems so paradoxical for the representation that the ordinary consciousness does not take this sentence seriously. But Hegel says that it is very hard, very difficult, very demanding for thought to grasp this identity, so to speak. Yeah. He says that there is no determination which is set or would be set which would I need my translation because my German is not good enough yet. Maybe it will not improve, I don't know, but yeah. So yeah, being and nothing are the opposition in its immediacy, namely without any determination has been set which would contain a relation to another. But so they have no determination, but at the same time this Bestimmungslosigkeit, this absence of determination, is what both share in common, so to speak. So yeah. Sie enthalten aber diese Bestimmung, wie in dem vorhergehenden Paragraph ausgezeigt ist, die Bestimmung, welche eben in beiden dieselbe ist. So they contain, being and nothing contain, so to speak, the same determination, namely the absence of determination or immediacy or sameness. So, yeah. Die Deduktion ihrer Einheit ist insofern ganz analytisch, wie überhaupt der ganze Fortgang des Philosophierens als methodischer, nämlich als notwendiger nichts anderes ist als bloß das Setzen desjenigen, was in einem Begriffe schon enthalten ist. So here, very important, we have the idea of deduction. To deduce, it's a Latin word. Deduco means to make follow from. To follow from, to deduce means you have an idea, a determination, a proposition, and you derive another from the first idea. You deduce. Logical deduction, for instance. And he says that the deduction of their unity is analytical, and to analyze means to separate, to distinguish what is contained within an object, but here we have no object yet. And Kant says that when we analyze a concept, we clarify, we separate what is contained within the concept. But Kant says analysis, to analyze, doesn't teach us anything, because we only clarify what is contained in the concept. And in chemistry, analysis means to separate the various chemical elements contained within a chemical substance. But one can learn what the composite elements of the substance are, but one doesn't learn anything because they were already contained in the chemical substance. It's only a clarification for the mind. It's only an enlightening moment. So to analyze is to enlighten. And Hegel says that the deduction of their unity is completely analytical, like the progress of philosophy as a methodical and a necessary process, which consists in setting, das Setzen, to set what is contained in a concept. So here we have a very Hegelian idea, namely that to think means to unfold, to develop, to bring forth, to reveal what is contained within a concept. I will illustrate by what this means with a political example. The American Constitution. If you said at the beginning that all men are created equal, it is in the very logic of the Constitution that a certain amount of time later you have modern day America with the leftist ideology that everyone is equal because it's contained in the Constitution. So it's just a development. And the Constitution contained a contradiction, namely that it was founded by white men, but they proclaimed equality of all men. So eventually they had to be abolished by their own product, in a way. That's just an illustration. And that's why white nationalists today want to oppose the American Constitution, because there is nothing in the American Constitution which might prevent the white race from being abolished. Yeah. Okay. Ebenso richtig als die Einheit des Seins und Nichts ist es aber auch, dass sie schlechthin verschieden sind. So, although that the unity of being and nothing is correct, they are also distinguished and distinct. One is not what the other is. Das eine nicht ist, was das andere ist. So we have the ambiguity that they are identical, but different nonetheless. Although identity and difference are determinations of the essence, but that's to make things intelligible. And here, I will continue the commentary of the first part of the subsequent paragraph, and then I will comment what I wrote. Allein weil der Unterschied hier sich noch nicht bestimmt hat, because the difference has not yet determined itself, denn eben Sein und Nichts sind noch das Unmittelbare, because there is no determination yet, being and nothing are just the immediate, so ist wie an denselben ist, das Unsagbare, the unexpressible, the unspeakable, what cannot be named, expressed. That's Chinese philosophy about the absolute principle, which is unexpressible, cannot be expressed, cannot be spoken of, etc. Die bloße Meinung, the simple aiming. Yeah. So here's what I wrote. It's quite complex, but it helps understand the logic, because here we have the shorter logic, which is a simplified version of the logic, but the greater logic, which is die Wissenschaft der Logik, is much more complex. So here I will try to make the transition between the Enzyklopädie and the Wissenschaft der Logik, which is more complex. So here's what could be said. Being is nothing. I've shown this in my video about pure being, and Hegel has shown this at the beginning. Being is nothing. Nothing is being, because nothing is nothing. So nothing is. It is itself. Nothing is. But one can also say that being is not being, because being is nothing. So we had being is nothing, but because being is nothing, being is not being. So being is not itself. That's very serious. That's profound speculative thought, which is at the root of everything. And nothing is not nothing, because we cannot say that nothing is nothing, because nothing has no being, so nothing is not nothing. So yeah, nothing is not nothing. So being is not being, and nothing is not nothing. So both are the opposite of themselves. And then I wrote, being is not nothing, because it is not being. I have to interpret what I what I wrote, because I was inspired when I wrote this, but now I struggle to understand. So being is not nothing. That seems obvious, because yeah, I understand. Sometimes I get lost in my own thoughts. So being is not nothing. We can. I wanted to say we can all agree on this, but just a few seconds ago I said being is nothing and being is not being, and now I'm saying being is not nothing, but because being is not being, and here language is important. Being is not being. That's what I said earlier. And it's not nothing because it is not being. And nothing is not being because being is nothing. So that's important. Nothing I'm laughing, but at the same time it's very serious, because this is at the root of of everything. I am trying to express what the Chinese philosopher say cannot be expressed, and I try to express this logically. So I continue. Nothing is not being because, as I have just shown, and Hegel in his logic, that because being is nothing, and because nothing is not nothing, nothing cannot be being, because being is nothing and nothing is not nothing. So nothing is not being. And here we have a dialectical proof that being and nothing are dialectical, and that eventually they are identical but different, and that they have to evolve and to becoming. I am trying to express in logical determinations what the modern physicists are trying to express in the realm of the virtual potentialities of the quantum emptiness, whatever. But logic has more reality than even quantum physics. So, yeah. Okay. Now, I comment the second paragraph. That's the following of the paragraph. Hegel says, it doesn't require a lot of effort to ridicule the proposition that being and nothing are identical. And indeed, if you say being and nothing are identical, then whether your house is or is not, that's indifferent. Whether the air you breathe is or is not, that's indifferent. Whether the sun is or not, that's indifferent. Whether law is or is not, that's indifferent. And whether God is or is not, that's indifferent. But here Hegel says, when we talk about a house, air, the sun, law, or God, we are, maybe God is different, but for the other determinations, we are talking about particular determined goals, utility, usefulness, and we are mentioning what is useful for us, for me. A house is useful for me. The air I breathe is useful for me. But Hegel says philosophy is precisely the doctrine which teaches humans to liberate themselves from a great number of finite goals or intentions, and to make them indifferent to the being or the not being of such a thing. And here is where speculative abstraction, what the Anglo-Saxon would call armchair theorizing, what most people who are not familiar with philosophy think is a Western disease, this intellectualization of everything. That's a Western disease. And this is where, in the view of the ordinary consciousness, so yeah, this is where speculative thinking meets what is ordinarily called as wisdom. And here we have the opposition, but also the unity between the Western view of philosophy and wisdom and the Eastern view of philosophy and wisdom. The ordinary consciousness believes that Westerners are lost in their pure abstraction, that the history of Western philosophy is pure, empty, speculative abstraction, but that in the East there is profound wisdom. The Eastern Buddhists, the Chinese, the Tibetans, the Indians, they have preserved a deep spirituality. They are wise, and we Westerners, we have lost ourselves in mindless thoughts. But Hegel says at the beginning of Logic that precisely the purpose of speculative philosophy is to become indifferent to many things. So to become wise in the ordinary representation that people have, the Buddhist monk or the Indian priest or whatever. So yeah, so eventually philosophy in its speculative, abstract Western perspective and wisdom in its Eastern view, here we have the view of ordinary consciousness, but both must eventually coincide. But, I wrote, what I'm trying to do is to restore the dignity of Western, which means mostly German, thought. That Hegel already did this, but I'm just commenting Hegel. So yeah, any particular object is a determinate being, Dasein or etwas, something, and is not being or nothing. And yeah, so any determined being is not being, and here we can use the language is not being, but it's also is not being, which in German is nicht sein. So any determinate being is not being, namely is nicht sein, namely being with negation. And being with negation is the German concept Dasein. So, determinate being ist Dasein. Yeah. Then he says that when a concrete object, concrete means a unity of different determinations, is substituted for pure being or pure nothing, representation, which is the ordinary consciousness, gets confused. And I said, Dasein ist nicht nicht und Dasein ist nicht sein. In English, Dasein is not nothing and Dasein is not being. But here in German, we can connect the words to say that Dasein ist nicht nichts und Dasein ist nicht sein, but Dasein ist nicht sein. That's the following logical development. Dasein ist Dasein, but also Dasein ist nicht sein. So it's the unity of itself and its other. That's why I want you to learn German. Maybe someday some Chinese philosophers or wise men will learn German just to understand their own supreme principle, which is the same for all, but yeah. Okay. Okay. Third sub-paragraph. Es kann leicht gesagt werden, dass man die Einheit des Seins und Nichts nicht begreife. So it's easy to say that one does not conceive, begreifen means to conceive, to conceptualize the unity of being and nothing. But the concept of this unity is nothing but what has been expressed and showed. And what I have commented and what Hegel makes in maybe a more systematic and more methodical fashion in the logic. One can easily say that one does not conceive, begreifen, conceptualize the unity of being and nothing, but precisely the concept of this unity is what has been shown. You can read Hegel or watch my two previous videos about pure being, pure nothing, or this video, but with the previous ones also. Man versteht aber auch unter dem Begreifen noch etwas weiteres als den eigentlichen Begriff. Es wird ein mannigfaltigeres, reicheres Bewusstsein eine Vorstellung verlangt, sodass ein solcher Begriff als ein konkreter Fall vorgelegt werde, mit dem das Denken in seiner gewöhnlichen Praxis vertrauter wäre. So, what Hegel says basically that ordinary consciousness expects more than just the concept of this unity, a more varied, a more a wealthier representation than just the concept. But I will illustrate later what the unity of being and nothing is by making sensuous illustrations. Insofern das nicht begreifen können, that's the greatness of the German language. You can create words out of nothing, I guess, by uniting together words to create new words. So, nicht begreifen können literally means not conceptualizing being capable of. If I had to translate in pidgin English, I guess. But that's why it's better to speak German sometimes. So basically this lack of ability of being able to conceptualize is just the lack of habit, lack of use to move oneself in abstract thoughts without mixing in this abstraction any sensuous ordinary representation, and to maintain fixed the speculative proposition in its pure speculative abstraction. And here, maybe when you understand the obsession of someone like Hegel with pure abstraction in the realm of thought, you might understand why at some moment in the history of Germany there was an obsession about purity, so to speak, because the Germans in the realm of thought are obsessed with purity and abstraction and not mixing together representation and thought. So yeah, I will talk about National Socialism later, but already here we have glimpses of German excesses maybe. So he says that the way of thinking, Art des Wissens, the way of knowing in speculative philosophy is distinguished from ordinary consciousness and from the other sciences. That's why usually the Anglo-Saxons, with their empirical mind, cannot understand, not because they're not intelligent, but because it requires a tremendous effort, and it's not that they lack the will, but they think, okay, that's just nonsense. German philosophy is nonsensical. I will not waste my time trying to understand this armchair theorizing, this mumbo-jumbo. But don't worry, the Germans, someone like Schopenhauer, already said that Hegel's philosophy was just mumbo-jumbo. So the Germans don't need the English to criticize themselves. They are their own critics, in a way. I'm sorry. Okay. Heißt das nicht begreifen, aber nur, dass man sich die Einheit des Seins und nicht vorstellen könne. If we call this not conceptualizing, namely the unity of being and nothing, the lack of the capability of representing oneself, what this unity is or might be, but there are precisely an infinite number of representation which illustrate, by giving examples, the unity of being and nothing. Das Beispiel davon, das am nächsten liegt, ist das Werden. So the most example that we have of the unity of being and nothing is becoming. And here I have listed many examples of becoming, or the unity of being and nothing, which seems to be ungraspable, which cannot be conceptualized. But somehow, if I say being is nothing, people might say, are you sure? If you want to know why, watch my videos, read Hegel, you will understand, hopefully. But in ordinary consciousness, people have a tremendous amount of representation of what the unity of being and nothing, that which we call das Werden, or becoming. And here, from the most abstract to the most intelligible in terms of representation, I can list, it's not a complete list, but it's just an illustration. Creation, there is nothing, and being comes out of nothing. To create is unity of nothing and being, becomes. A creation has become, has come out of the creator, the artist, whatever. Birth, before you were born, you were nothing, and you become a living individual. But you say, yeah, but before your birth, you were a spermatozoid, and before that, etc., etc. But if you go back far enough, you stumble upon the work of Mr. Krauss, a universe from nothing. So eventually, the universe has been born out of nothing, according to the modern empirical Anglo-Saxon rationalistic philosopher, atheistic physicist. Disappearing, when something disappears, there was being, it was there, and now it's not there. Being comes into nothing. Disappearance is an expression of the unity of both. Death, destruction, something was there, it is destroyed, it is not there anymore. Now, in a more intellectual, it's not still the realm of representation, it's still an intermediary between pure thoughts and sensuous representation. We have change, modification, transformation, evolution, development. Evolution is nothing becoming being, and being becoming nothing. That's evolution. Something is negated and something comes into being. And the same goes for change, modification, etc., etc. In the realm of quantitative determinations, growth, increase, decrease, rise and fall, movement, in the realm of space and mathematics, these are unities of nothing and being. Something was there, it falls, it is not there anymore, it is here. Something rises, it was there, it is not there anymore, it rises, and now it is here. Being and nothing. Movement, it works in all directions. Now, in the realm of pure representation, fire is a view of becoming, because it's moving and it consumes that which is burnt. A waterfall, the water falling in a waterfall, or a river. The water was here, it's there, it moves, it changes. The seasons, the change of the seasons. spring was here, spring is not here anymore, now is summer, and then fall, and then winter, and then spring again. The movement of the sun and the moon in the day. We can see the sun moving. It's very slow, and if you look, you will burn your eyes, but you can see all along the day that the sun and the moon, I mean, the moon is mostly the night, but in the day, the movement of the sun, in the night, the movement of the moon. Aging. You do not see yourself age, but if you compare pictures of yourself 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you can see that you have changed. Something in your appearance has disappeared, something has appeared. Wrinkles, I think you call this, or a loss of hair, or becoming less attractive, unfortunately. Yeah, and I will illustrate this by a song, Born to Die, by Lana Del Rey. That's an artistic, beautiful expression of becoming. Birth is non-being coming into being. Death is being coming into nothing. And both are one. To be born is to be born to die. Birth and death are one. They are different, but they are nonetheless one. They are becoming. They are a concept. They are a speculative idea. It is expressed in modern pop culture beautifully by Lana Del Rey. So, yeah. Okay. Jedermann hat eine Vorstellung vom Werden und wird ebenso zugeben, dass es eine Vorstellung ist. So everyone has a representation of becoming. I have just made many illustrations. And they think that it is one representation. Wenn man sie analysiert, die Bestimmung von Sein, aber auch von dem schlechthin anderen desselben, dem Nichts, darin enthalten ist. So if we analyze, if we separate what is contained within the representation of becoming, we find being a nothing. Something is or was, ceases to be, so that's the negation, and something was not and comes into being. So that's the negation of being and the negation of nothing. And this is becoming. He says another example, if there needs to be another example, is the beginning. In the beginning, there is nothing, but there is a being, something which must come out of the beginning. The story has not started yet, but eventually it has to begin. So beginning, people, that's, here I will quote Hegel. Hegel says, people say being and nothing are identical, it's nonsense. But the idea of beginning, what do you have in the idea, the concept, that's not a concept, but that's an idea, representation of beginning. Something is not, but has to be eventually, has to begin. That's a representation. Everyone can use the word beginning in everyday language. And it's an illustration of the unity of being and nothing. Okay. And if I wanted to say, I would say that the end is contained in the beginning, because whatever begins has to end at some point, even if it's to begin again after. But so that's why the beginning is the beginning of the end, I guess. And the end of the beginning, you can make countless spiritual remarks about this kind of stuff, but yeah. Okay, Subparagraph 4. Es ist aber noch zu bemerken, dass der Ausdruck Sein und Nichts ist dasselbe. So it is to be noticed that the expression being and nothing is the same, is identical. Oder die Einheit des Seins und Nichts, or the unity of being and nothing, as well as all the other such unities, that we find later in the development of philosophy, namely the unity of the subject and the object, the finite and the infinite, mind and nature, man and God, etc., etc., are improper in the sense that they express the unity. If I say the unity of being and nothing, I express the unity, but at the same time there is the Verschiedenheit, the distinction, the distinguished and distinct aspect, the difference in a way. And that's why Hegel says that a speculative truth or concept or thought cannot be expressed in the form of a proposition. The form and the content have to be adequate to one another, and to express a speculative truth in the form of a proposition or a judgment is improper. Yeah. So basically, Hegel says everything is improper to express the truth except my own philosophy. Religion, it's improper because religion is representation, and truth has to be expressed in the realm of pure thought. Definitions, it's improper. Judgments, improper. Propositions, improper. So everything is everything is wrong except me. So whatever I blame on Hegel, maybe Hegel will blame it on me someday. So, but yeah, just to illustrate why, when you read Hegel, why do you find this kind of sentences which seem kind of an obsession? He talks the form, the proposition, the form and the content must be in adequation. But here's why. Because if you say being and nothing are the same, they are the same, but they are different. So it's not a proper way of expressing this. So yeah. Werden ist der wahre Ausdruck des Resultats von Sein und Nichts als die Einheit derselben. So becoming is the true expression of the result of being and nothing as the unity of both. Es ist nicht nur die Einheit des Seins und Nichts, sondern ist die Unruhe in sich. Die Unruhe, the restlessness. Die Einheit, die nicht bloß als Beziehung auf sich bewegungslos, not the unity which is not relation to itself in a unmoving way, sondern durch die Verschiedenheit des Seins und Nichts, but rather through the distinction of being and nothing, die in ihm ist, which is in itself, in sich gegen sich selbst ist, in itself against itself is. So, I will repeat in English. So, the unity of being and nothing is not just this unity, but it's the restlessness. It's not just relation to self as a peaceful, calm, unmoving, quiet movement, but it's distinction within itself, which eventually is in sich gegen sich selbst. So it's opposition within itself. And here I will make a song. First, here we have a notion of truth. He says, Werden ist der wahre Ausdruck. So becoming is the true expression. And there again, I repeat, truth means, for Hegel, concrete, grow together, development, process, evolution, if you will. So Werden has developed itself from pure being and pure nothing. It is the result of the process. It has evolved from, it has unfolded, and that's why becoming is more true than either pure being or pure nothing, because it is the result of a process. So Hegel is a process philosopher. Whitehead did not invent anything. And then the Unruhe, the restlessness, in sich gegen sich selbst, in self against one's own self. There is a song by Rammstein, the German banned. And pop culture is partly the expression of the truth of absolute spirit. And German culture is the expression of the German spirit. And the song Ich will, that can be a representation of the expression of the primordial will, the primordial impulse, which has become a subject and can express itself and saying Ich, I want. And this says, Ich will die Ruhe stören. I want to disturb the tranquility. And he says also, I want you to understand me, etc., etc. But what we have here, it's very profound. It's very significant, because it means that there is conflict within being, because being is not being, because it is nothing. So being is conflictual. Nothing is conflictual, because nothing is nothing. So it is the opposite of itself, because it is what it is. So it is not what it is. So it is not itself. So being is conflictual. Nothing is conflictual. Becoming is this movement of self-opposition within itself, is conflictual. That's why there is restlessness, the Unruhe, conflict, inner conflict, and eventually outer conflict, and struggle at the very core of being and becoming and all the following logical determinations. So the life of the Absolute, the life of God, is a struggle, is restless. And if man is made in the image of God, the life of man is a struggle. And here, I said that I will talk about some other aspect of the German mind. A famous German chancellor said, those who want to live, let them fight. Those who do not want to fight in this world of eternal struggle do not deserve to live. Life is a struggle in this view, so how come that Hitler said this? Because there is struggle and restlessness in the core of being and becoming. And one could say that's a problem. But here I will develop. Struggle is bad, one could say. That's partly true. But without struggle, there would be no virtue. Everyone admires virtue. But what is virtue, says Kant? In order to be virtuous, you have to struggle against yourself, against your lower tendencies. So, all the virtue that has ever existed in the world is a product of a struggle. It's not easy to be virtuous. It's even very difficult. That is what is most difficult, to be virtuous. There are people who are naturally kind and good. They are good without effort. But to be virtuous is not the same as to be good. To be virtuous means to struggle against yourself. And without struggle, there would be no reward. And people enjoy being rewarded. But in order to be rewarded, you have to have struggled, at least, or attempted to struggle, or succeeded. And here with the idea of success. Without struggle, there would be no success. And everyone enjoy success, either succeeding themselves or enjoy the success of others. When a person you love succeeds, you are happy. You share the success. You share the joy of him or her being successful. When the football player you love receive a medal or a prize or whatever, when the artist that you admire gets recognition, when your children succeed in school, when your friends get the job they want, you are happy of their success. But without struggle, there would be no success. So that's the ambiguity of struggle. Struggle is can mean violence, war, pain, difficulty, hardships. But the good aspect is it also means virtue, reward, success, satisfaction, the satisfaction of having overcome the struggle. And also, there is not just struggle within being. There is also the will to abolish the struggle, to abolish the restlessness, the Unruhe, to find peace, to find stability, to find calm, tranquility. And so, God, in its pure abstraction, it's not yet God, but being and becoming, they are both struggle and the will to abolish the struggle. Because struggle is contradictory, it's a product of contradiction, it is itself contradictory, so it wants both struggle and peace and tranquility and calm. And here, I will talk very briefly, but the Buddhist and the classical Buddhists, they want to abolish the struggle of existence and the struggle of the mind, which goes from one idea to the other, constantly changing. And the Buddhists say, try to find the inner peace. And they are right, but it's very difficult. And the reason why meditation and a trend toward Buddhism has become so famous in the modern West is because the West has lost its spirituality, and the conditions of Western life are stressful. They are not harsh because there is comfort. So the conditions are not harsh for the majority of Westerners. They are relatively easy, but there is stress because we are constantly being stimulated by advertisement and the need to fulfill all our desires by consumption, etc. So it's stressful. It's not harsh for everyone, as in other parts of the world, but it's stressful, and that's why people seek calm and stillness, and that's why the gurus who promote calmness, peace of mind, tranquility of mind through meditation and spiritual exercises have such a lot of success, because what I'm trying to express is that if in the pure abstraction of being, nothing, and becoming, there is a struggle, and the will to stop the struggle, and this will to find peace, that's here represented, to find stability within the self-conflictual movement, which drives the logical process forward. So, yeah, there's this ambiguity, and if you understand this, you understand why there is so much conflict in the world, and why humans, love conflict and peace. They love both at various degrees. Yeah. Now, speculative thinking. Becoming, das Werden. Focus, because it's important. Becoming is not. In other words, becoming has no being, so we cannot say becoming is. Becoming is not, becoming becomes. It is not, it becomes. Because becoming is itself, becoming is becoming, but if it is itself, if becoming is becoming, it is not, it becomes. So becoming becomes. Because becoming is becoming, it is not becoming, and because it is not becoming, it's not becoming, it becomes. That's complicated, but that's the logical process. So, because becoming is itself, for the reason that it is itself, namely the opposition within itself, it is not itself, so that's why becoming becomes. Because becoming is what becoming is. And becoming is not, it becomes, precisely. So, to make things intelligible, becoming is the opposite of itself. But at the same time, it is not the opposite of itself, because it is itself, namely it is becoming, and that's why becoming becomes. Becoming is unstable, and it must become, so produce a result, and the result of becoming is what we call Dasein. So I have just explained, maybe I'm not as rigorous as Hegel, but I have just explained why becoming has to produce something, namely Dasein, and I will talk about Dasein later, but becoming is unstable, it's the opposition within itself, and something must come out of becoming, and this result is Dasein, and that's how the logical process unfolds. Honestly, this is really demanding intellectually. I worked a lot to make this video in thoughts and writing and thinking, but I'm exhausted. It seems, oh, that's just thinking. Try to work a real job, to put your hands in the dirt, as they say. Yeah, maybe I will do that, but to think thoroughly is very demanding. I am exhausted. Yeah. Then the fifth and final passage here, honestly, I don't really understand yet, because I lack, as an individual, I lack the philosophical culture. I will try to express what I can, but Hegel says the proposition that being, das Sein, das Übergehen ist in nichts, so that being is the passage, the going into nothing, and that nothing is the passage, the going into something, is the proposition of becoming, and this has been expressed historically in the proposition aus nichts wird nichts, out of nothing becomes nothing, or nothing comes out of nothing. Etwas wird nur aus etwas, something comes only out of something. So this is ancient and medieval metaphysics, and the idea is that the world cannot have been created because there is nothing which can come out of nothing, so something cannot come out of nothing, so the world is not created, it is eternal. That's the view. And the other view is that something must come out of something. It cannot come out of nothing, so there always had to be something. That's the other view. But honestly, I'm not sure, because precisely the beginning of logic shows that indeed something comes out of nothing. And I'm not yet smart enough to understand these metaphysical subtleties, but these are the kind of questions that the theoretical physicists, the cosmologists, the metaphysicians of past and now ask themselves. But I'm not convinced, precisely because out of nothing comes becoming and eventually Dasein as a logical process. So, yeah. I have commented the paragraph. Now I will comment the Zusatz, which is the addition. Das Werden ist der erste konkrete Gedanke und damit der erste Begriff, wohingegen Sein und Nichts leere Abstraktionen sind. So Hegel says, becoming is the first concept, and the concept for Hegel is a unity of different determinations grasped in thought, and this is what he calls concrete, and this is why Werden, that's becoming, is the first true thought. Being and nothing are not true in a Hegelian sense, in the sense that they are pure abstraction. They have not yet evolved, progressed, developed. They are not concrete, so they are not true. Becoming, das Werden, is a concrete, speculative, true thought. Sprechen wir vom Begriff des Seins, so if we speak of the concept of being, so kann derselbe nur darin bestehen, werden zu sein, denn als das Sein ist es das leere Nichts, als dieses aber das leere Sein. So, if we speak of the concept of being, this concept cannot consist in anything but to become becoming, to be becoming, and to become becoming, because being is the pure nothing, which is itself the same as pure being. So in being we have nothing, and in nothing we have being. But this being, which in nothing is by itself, is becoming. Yes. Das Werden ist nur das Gesetztsein dessen, was das Sein seiner Wahrheit nach ist. That's very important. Becoming is only das Gesetztsein, literally means being set. Gesetzt is the law, but also to set. Setzen means to set, to posit. So becoming is nothing but the positioning, the setting of what being is according to its truth. The truth of being is not to be being, but to be becoming, to become. Being becomes, that's the truth. So we can say that thinking and being are opposed. But if we consider being as die Reflexion determines being, so the thinking mind, which is not strictly speculative, its Reflexion is some sort of an intermediary between Vorstellung, namely representation, and speculative thinking. So if we take being as die Reflexion determines being, we can say that being is what is identical to itself and affirmative. But now if we consider thinking in the same view, thinking is that which is identical to itself. When I say I am identical to myself. I am me. Maybe I am someone else, but okay. But this identity of being and thinking, or being and thought, is not to be taken as concrete and to say that a stone is the same as a thinking man, because a concrete is something totally different from this abstract determination as such. When we talk about being, we do not talk about any concrete, because being is the pure abstraction. Okay. So, to summarize, being can be thought of as identical with itself, affirmative. Thinking can be thought of as identical with self, so both have the same determination. And that's why one can say that thought and being are identical. But they're also different, and the process of differentiating thought and being and reestablishing this identity is the entire process of philosophy eventually. Das Werden ist als die erste konkrete, zugleich die erste wahrhafte Gedankenbestimmung. Becoming as the first real determination of thought is the first concrete and the first truth. You are understanding Hegel, how Hegel thinks, what concrete, truth mean. Now a little bit about the history of philosophy. In der Geschichte der Philosophie ist es das System des Heraclitus, welches dieser Stufe der logischen Idee entspricht. So in the history of philosophy, the equivalent of becoming is the moment, the stage of Heraclitus. When Heraclitus says, alles fließt, everything flows, Panta, rhei, in ancient Greek, everything is in a state of becoming, in a state of flowing, becoming. So ist damit das Werden als die Grundbestimmung alles dessen, was da ist. So becoming is the fundamental determination of everything which is present, was da ist means what has Dasein, what has presence, so to speak, ausgesprochen, wohingegen, wie früher bemerkt würde, die Eleaten das Sein, das starre, prozesslose Sein als das allein wahre auffassten. So, before Heraclitus, in a chronological perspective, the Eleaten, namely Parmenides, had thought about the truth as being without process, without movement, just pure being. But the relationship between Parmenides and Heraclitus, or the principle of the Eleaten and the principle of Heraclitus, so the difference between being and becoming in the history of philosophy, is expressed by Heraclitus as saying das Sein ist nicht mehr als das Nichtsein. Being is not more than non-being. In Greek, auden malon to on to me ontos esi. I'm not sure that my pronunciation is great, but yeah. So being has no truth, and non-being has no truth either. Being is not, non-being is not, only becoming. That would be Heraclitus, broadly expressed. So the negativity of the abstract being, of the pure abstraction of being, and the unity of being, which is set how should I explain this? I am speaking in French, in German, in English, so I'm sorry if I have these moments of struggle. It's difficult to think three languages at the same time in one's mind. What is meant here is that pure being is abstraction because of its negative aspect. There's nothing in being. And in becoming, in the process of becoming, being sets its identity with the abstraction of itself, which is nothing. So that's another way of saying that becoming is the truth of being and nothing, because they are identical but nonetheless different, and becoming is their truth. We have here an example of a real wahrhafte, refutation of a philosophical system by another and through another, which refutation consists precisely that the principle of the philosophy which is being contradicted or refuted is taken in its dialectical aspect, and the philosophy that you want to refute is taken as a ideale moment, so you idealize by extracting the principle of the philosophy that you want to refute and incorporating this philosophy within your own system, which contains the negation of the previous system as an idealized moment. And now your own system einer höheren konkreten Form der Idee herabgesetzt wird. So your own system now is more determined, more concrete, more rich and wealthy in thought, because it contains the negation of the predecessor, but as aufgehoben, negated and preserved. So Heraclitus is the Aufhebung of Parmenides. Yep. Now I will comment. The view of Heraclitus is that, or maybe it's Plato talking about Heraclitus, whatever, that the image of becoming is a river. And the story says that you do not swim twice in the same river, because the water has changed. And one might say the borders of the rivers are set and fixed, only the water flows. But from a physical standpoint, the sand and the earth, the the sand and the earth, which consist in making the borders of the rivers and the rocks at the bottom of the rivers, they are being washed away and used and eroded, and atoms are being drawn away from them by the process of the river. So there is a smart dialectician in one of Plato's dialogue, I think it's Cratyle, I don't know how to say it in English, Cratylus, who says that not only you do not swim twice in the same river, but you do not even swim once in the same river, because when you are in the river is already changing. So you cannot swim twice, you cannot swim once. The Greeks and the Germans, they really are smart and speculative and profound. So the idea is that a river is that which constantly changes in order to remain the same. Everything has to change so that nothing changes. And this unity of everything changes but remains the same is dialectics. And yeah. And another example, Heidegger. I've never read much of Heidegger, but I know that he talks about Dasein. But I will show what Dasein is, and I've already said what Dasein is. Dasein is the result of becoming. And it's a very poor, very abstract determination. But he talked in his lectures about Parmenides and Heraclitus. He wanted to go back to Parmenides and Heraclitus. But he might as well have gone back to the beginning of Hegel's logic, because everything is there, so to speak. Parmenides, Heraclitus, Dasein. Yeah. I will illustrate with a modern example drawn from the spiritual life of the West. The alt-right is the refutation of the alt-light, or whatever, the moderate, conservative right, which talks about Western culture, Western values, etc., etc., conservative values. The alt-right accepts the need to preserve Western values and Western culture, or whatever, and free market, libertarianism, whatever, but they add the psychological determination of IQ and race realism. So the alt-right, or the white nationalist, whatever, they are conservatives who talk about IQ and race. So this is the Aufhebung of the conservative movement. And the pagan right wing, they are the Aufhebung of the alt-right, because they accept to talk about IQ and race realism. So they take this as a moment of their own development, but they say your principle, namely white nationalism, as such lacks a determination, namely a religious and European cultural aspect, and the pagan right is the Aufhebung of the alt-right. That's why the pagan right is spiritually more rich than the alt-right. Yeah. But Hegel says that Werden, so becoming, is a very poor determination, because it is just the unity of being and nothing. That's why it's just in the beginning. Becoming is very poor. The result of becoming is very rich, but becoming as such is very poor. He says that precisely it must fulfill, feels itself, go within its depth and fulfill itself, and such a Vertiefung of becoming more rich, more concrete. An example that we have is life. Life is becoming. When you live, you grow and you change every day. You age every day. When you are young, aging is called growing, at least physically, not always intellectually. and when you have reached a certain threshold, aging is called declining physically. But you can improve intellectually while being physically declining, and you can improve physically without improving intellectually. So that's the biological and mental aspect of life. But life is a process. It's a becoming in the realm of biology. And in the realm of mind or spirit, Geist in German, which is more spirit, spirit is an example of becoming. That's why many people, not many, but some people are restless and are always in a search and quest for understanding and knowledge and evolution, spiritual evolution. Self-development is becoming in the realm of mind and spirit. It's becoming for the mind. So life and spirit are examples, illustrations of becoming, but more intensive, wealthier than the simple logical determination of becoming. And spirit, Hegel says, is the unity which contains within itself the abstract moment of the logical idea and of nature. Spirit is the unity of logic and nature, for the view of Hegel. So I will then briefly talk about Evola, which opposes in his books being and becoming. But being and becoming taken in their abstraction, they are nothing but what has been said. So, yeah. And, about life. I wrote that life is birth, growth, maturity, decline, death. In the biological complete life, birth, growth, maturity, decline, death. From the biological perspective. The life of the mind is also growth. Can you reach spiritual maturity? I don't know. Probably when you reach spiritual maturity, you do not decline anymore, because that would not be maturity otherwise. So, but the spiritual and intellectual life of thinking humans is self-development, and it's a journey, an intellectual journey. We are here, maybe on Earth, to develop intellectually. And to develop intellectually and spiritually means to accept that we are also here biologically to decay and decline and die eventually. So, yeah. That's what I could say about becoming. That's what I could say. So hopefully the beginning of Hegel's logic has been made intelligible. I've made more than 4 hours in video about the broad view of being, pure nothing, becoming. The key ideas of Hegel, I have developed them. I don't know if I will make other videos about the following logical categories. If I have the opportunity, the time, if I think it's the correct decision to take, I don't know. But I have set the foundation of logical, dialectical, speculative thinking. So, yeah.